Hello and welcome.
Welcome back to the show. We have Rob Ritchie with us today. Thank you so much, Rob, for coming in.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
And you have a book launch this evening.
I have a book launch this evening.
Okay.
At time of recording here, I know that they're getting ready for me down there at a little place called Tonight Live Happenings Bar, Queen and Roncesvalles.
Okay.
1704 Queen Street West.
All right.
Yeah, a great little spot for duo. And have you been in? Have you ever been in?
What building is it in? I mean, we used to actually live further down there in that area.
It's on the north side of the street, about 4 or 5 buildings in from the corner. So it is a micro bar, as they call it, and they do singles and duos. They do a lot of comedy review things in there because there's room for a mic. But they have done book readings before, and so I jumped at the chance to do that. It doesn't seat that many people, and when you're doing literary stuff, you have to be realistically modest with the numbers you're going to pull in for.
Right. So it's not like you're booking a musical show, and then they ask you, "What's your draw?" And then for a book launch, they ask you that question. Then you say,
and fortunately, this guy, the owner goes by the interesting nickname Clamp. Which I have to ask him about.
Okay.
But everyone knows him as Clamp, and Clamp is well aware of the parameters of a usual literary event because he's hosted a few of them. So he didn't really broach that topic at all. He said, "We'll have you." So that was that was great. And like I said, the venue fits the size, and we seem to have good turnout coming to see us. There'll be a few readings, there'll be some Q&A, and we'll do a song or two because that's what we do.
Great. And who's going to be providing some of the music?
I'll do a couple. My son, Josh Ritchie, who you've had on the show before.
That's right.
And will again.
He's on the next episode.
Yeah, he's going to do. And there's a duo who live actually in this neighborhood, a folk duo called Bassett. I don't know if you've heard of Bassett.
Oh, okay. I'm not familiar with them.
They're just up and coming, I would say. I mean, they have established themselves. I just saw on my socials that they just secured a booking agent for both the UK and here in Canada.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
And so I know they've started to do some tours of the U.S. folk clubs as well and stuff. And I saw a few venues that I remembered from my days past when I toured with the folk band Tanglefoot. So,
that's right. That's right. So you're a musician and an author.
Yeah.
And do you find yourself using the same sort of creative muscles, or is it a totally different
Totally
thing?
different.
Okay.
There's disciplines that are the same, but the function, people have asked that before, and usually it gets phrased, which do you prefer doing more? And there isn't an answer. I prefer going back and forth.
Right.
I'm not sure.
Well, which is easier to do? Or is that even, are they both
they're
different
both
you can't compare
similarly ridiculous to try to, in this day and age. Writing is easier in the sense that you can immerse yourself into a project over a long period of time and just, go with it. My writing sort of schedule is not so much, it is when I'm writing so many hours a day, but it's more, I chunk out a month or two, do a section, leave it, go do some music stuff, or just set it down for a while, revisit it, edit it after a couple months. And so it's an on again, off again, which means I'm not the most quick and prolific prose writer, fiction writer, but I, it's gotten me 4 novels to date. So
I saw that. And the title of your latest novel,
it's called Between the Sand and the Sea.
Okay.
Yeah, I view it as my COVID curtailed imagination at work on this one. That every other book I wrote, because you can, when you're writing a novel, send your characters through time and across the planet and through this continent and that continent. When every other book I had did this. This book is basically 2 women sitting on a Lake Huron beach over a 2-week heat wave period. So somewhere subconsciously, because I couldn't go anywhere, my characters, they can't go anywhere either.
Okay.
So that said, I did a novel that was completely cast with female characters, which is a little, it's outside of your comfort zone a bit. The old white 50-something guy writing about 30 and 40-something women and their lives and stuff. So yes, there's in the back of my head, there's the stay in your lane people that But it started out as a writing exercise from sort of observations that I saw of people who frequented and read along the shore and met and visited, and it just grew from there into not a long novel, but longer than a novella or a short story.
Right. And is that part of the process, like just making general observations about human behavior?
It starts with that. Okay. I think it starts with that. In this case, well, actually, with every book, people that I've written, people have said, "What was the inspiration?" And there was no like lightning bolt inspiration. It's like almost mundane little things that have tipped me in. For example, the first book I wrote, which has a hockey theme too. The main character is a retired minor pro player who's now a scout, and it's really about his troubled past he had with an abusive father. But there's all sorts of issues in there as well with tangential characters, and there's First Nations elements. There's a mysterious character, a scout who really bends his ear, who is of First Nation descent, and the whole impetus started behind that is I was watching a CBC program about the First Nations of the Nootka. Now Nootka is not the actual preferred name of the peoples out there. It's actually a blanket or name of 12 different language groups, but they were the whaling people out there. And I was watching a documentary on CBC about the whalers' watch houses they had out there. The shamans would take the would-be whalers, but write a passage for boys into a place where no other people of the village could see, and that's where they had their rites of passage before they went out and they joined the whaling brigade. These had artifacts that were amongst all those artifacts. You've probably heard that at the turn of the century, the New York museums came and swept them up for a song, and they're now stuck in the bowels of some museum. And this documentary is about trying to repatriate them too. Okay. And actually, the impetus for the book that I had was the discussion and the controversy back in the communities over whether when we get these artifacts back, do they go into our museum? Are they things of the past, or are they living items? Did they go back to the Whalers Watch House
back
locale
to the communities, right?
To what their purpose was? Okay. I found that a fascinating question. From a little tidbit, the story goes in every other direction. But in terms of this new book, it was just I was on my way to a playing gig. It was in a heat wave. My wife suggested go early and just stop and have a swim. So on Lake Huron shoreline along this sandy beach that did have some boulders over on the side, which attracted my attention. I went to claim my boulder. I was just about to sit down with my book and my towel and sit down, and a woman jumped in front of me and sat down and claimed the boulder silently. She just like there's hundreds to choose from here,
right,
and wouldn't look, and I thought, this is your spot. For some reason, this means something to you, and you're not going to tell me. So I left, and it was this kind of amalgam of two different interesting things that happened at once, and I found her interesting. She sort of was the inspiration for my main character, but shortly after that, I did go for a swim, and I'm toweling off, and I look back at shore, and up on shore a little bit, there's an elderly woman who's done up to the nines. She's dressed like she's going to like your great aunt's best pantsuit kind of thing, and hair sprayed to no wind could get through it, and she's holding a balloon, happy birthday balloon. And I'm staring at her because she's looking at me because it looks like she wants me to acknowledge that she has this balloon, and she's kind of looking at me and nodding. So I nod back and I say, "That's very nice," and she wanders off happily, sort of whistling to herself, kind of walking down this kind of breakwater dock, like she hears a musical in her head, kind of. And I didn't bide my time with her too much. I was back to my car, and I happened to look up at the car and look back out at the end of this breakwater as she walked to, and just in time to see her at the edge of this dock holding up the balloon and letting it go into the wild blue yonder. And I thought, what's the story there?
Yeah.
So there's a secondary character. And just like that afternoon, I stopped for a swim on the way to a gig.
Wow.
And that's 6 years ago.
Right.
And that was the start of the writing exercise, which I did nowhere near a Lake Huron shore. I was on tour in Yorkshire, England, and in a farmhouse up in the moors when I did my first notes for this particular book.
Right. Yeah. So when you're coming up or kind of designing or creating characters for your book, how much are those characters are based on like real life people versus course, things you just create in your mind?
It varies. It's always a conundrum. How much should I be borrowing from people I know and friends I meet and stuff? I know I had a conversation with a fairly celebrated author, Elizabeth Hay, who's won a Giller, and Governor General and that sort of thing. And she always told the jokingly said, when I start to write another novel, my family don't come anywhere near me because they don't want to see themselves written in it. Right. And there's some truth to that. That my second last novel was about a band out on the road. And so I borrowed a whole host of anecdotes that my bandmates would readily remember as happening to us out on the road, but use them to sort of shape the narrative that I was doing. So it's begging and borrowing and stealing from other people to hopefully make a different character.
Right.
Yeah.
And have you had anyone approach you accusing of you of using them as a character and not being flattered by it, or even being flattered by it?
Well, I mean, the bandmates were really happy that they saw some of our favorite stories that we love to tell over and over again. The saying is, "Don't stop me if you've heard this one before."
That's right. Yeah.
So they were thrilled to see those and intrigued how they worked them way into a completely fictitious narrative.
Right.
I don't think I know that I can remember in a few cases where I've set some of the action in my hometown. My hometown's Wiarton, Ontario, by the way.
Okay.
And described a building, and people have said, well, that building couldn't have been on that street because there are no 2-story buildings on that street. They're all like that kind of detail, and fair enough, fair play. If you couldn't get by that, then I didn't do my job. I did, but for the most part, I try to be as accurate and research is a big thing in the novels. So.
Right. And so when did this sort of the spark for writing? When did that happen? Have you always been writing stories since you were in school, high school, or is this something newer?
University probably. I was writing something. Songwriting I was always doing. I was one of the songwriters. Everybody in Tanglefoot wrote and brought songs in. So everyone had more songs that could fit on the CDs. And I've done a couple of solo projects since. And we have a band that came out of Tanglefoot called RPR, Ritchie Parish Ritchie.
Okay, I was going to ask you what RPR stood for. I was guessing it was going to be the last name.
Yeah, so it's my brother and I, and Al Parrish, who was the bass player. Steve, my brother, was guitar player and vocalist, and I keyboards.
Right.
And we added a great percussionist named Beaker Granger, who lives up our way, who's toured all his life with various bands and been a session person for hire.
Right.
But
and he currently plays with Josh as well.
Yeah, and he plays with Josh as well, as do I. So we're the old folks in the back to blur us out and show that. Yes, and that's another band of songwriters. So I've been writing songs forever. I tried, writing musicals. I tried writing stage plays. And got bogged down in the economy that they all wanted, because if you're putting something on for production, it's always okay. Minimize the sets, minimize the cast. It has to be as economical and easy to get sets on it. Right. My first book, the one I mentioned about being hockey themed, started out. I was envisioning it as a stage play, all taking place in the stands of a northern British Columbia arena where two guys are scouting hockey players. When that didn't really work, and somebody said, just try prose, just try a novel. And well, I can, as I said, send them across the country, send them through time, and it frees up storytelling so much. It's kind of an obvious thing to say, but it really, it was the way to go. And since then, I've been a fiction writer when I'm not being a songwriter.
Right. Yeah. And then, musicians, of course, have musical influences. Now, as a writer, do you have any literary influences? Favorite authors?
I tend to read. I like reading Canadian authors.
Who are some of your favorites?
I mentioned Elizabeth Hay. Carol Shields, although she was American-born, got her notoriety here in Canada. There's some Wayne Johnson, who's a Newfoundland author, he may be my favorite at the moment because he just writes such unique time. He writes of Newfoundland as the nation of Newfoundland, because all his stories are set pre-Confederation, which was 1949 for Newfoundland. So you get to see just how a tenuous experiment that eventual Confederation thing. I think the vote when they finally, it was like 51 to 49%.
Okay.
It was very close. And he paints the picture of what Newfoundland was really like. Its own little colonies out there on that rock, whose associations were, well, there were some back to Europe, but far more the associations were Boston and New York and down the American seaboard than anything to do with Canada. And he's writing in the 1910s and 1920s, and inevitably as wonderful characters of modest birth who nevertheless find themselves kind of brushing up against industrialists and kind of exceeding the life stations, but he just paints a mosaic of the entire society really well, and really creates that world really. Yeah.
So do you foresee AI in the future kind of writing books instead of real life authors? Because now there was recently a sports I think magazine, I forget which one, you can look it up. They mentioned that for the past few months they've been using AI to write their sports articles, and no one has noticed.
Is that right?
Do you foresee AI taking over the literary world in any meaningful way, or even as a novel way, where here's a selection of books that were written by AI, and it doesn't get any bigger than that? It's just more of a novelty thing.
I mean, my instinct is because it's invading everything that it's going to happen. Do I like the idea? No. As I don't for the AI as it's entering the music world. Kind of, Josh and I have had discussions, and it just, and he says, and he's an old soul, young guy, but everything he listens to was recorded before he was born.
Right.
He's looking for his Queen and his Led Zeppelin and his.
And I hear he's into vinyl now. So
yes, see, thanks to you. Yeah. He loves his vinyl.
Excellent.
So I want to say there's going to be something terribly lost with it, and AI, depending on how great it could be or how good, would deliver a formula. Well, some people want to read a formula. I mean, Lord knows there's...
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, look at all the musical acts out there that have formulas for their music. And I won't mention any names, but...
Yeah. We're going to think them now,
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, we'll be here a while.
That's right.
Yeah, and formulaic, like the romance novel or the Harlequin or something. Well, there are almost templates for those.
It's like those Hallmark movies, Christmas movies, right? So,
yeah, I'm even told that not that the content would be AI generated, but I have actually it's our English agent, J.C. Bedford is her name, and she is a fantasy and a sci-fi writer over in England, quite successful.
Oh, wow.
But she talks about it, so she's genre literature. I'm just literary novels, which is kind of like miscellaneous. No specific genre, not mystery, not crime, not. And so she says that her publishers demand like within 20 pages of this is how long your book has to be, and this is how your font has to be, and your cover has to look somewhat like this. And,
oh wow!
And it's really genre specific. So, I mean, you can certainly imagine AI infiltrating that much to that degree. It already has, I guess.
Yeah, and now you see a lot of lawsuits, especially being launched against all the artist sort of creations that have been coming out that people have been posting in the past few months. Now that I have been reading, there have been lawsuits because the AI basically used someone's stylistic sort of art or how they would draw something.
I mean, it begs the question, like it's AI based on what? It has to be based on something from the past and some stylistic thing that is an intellectual property to some degree of somebody.
Because in order to program the AI, we had to put in our information from Homo sapiens and all the artworks and everything that we created, and it's kind of almost mimicking us in a way.
Yeah. Now you're just scaring me, Mark.
I know.
You just,
AI is probably monitoring us right now, just to see how.
Maybe we're not even talking.
That's right. All hail Calculon. I always say that, just in case AI takes over.
What he said.
That's right. That's right, AI. Our potential future overlords. I can help you round up other people to work in your sugar mines or whatever you do. Okay, so we got off topic. So I guess getting back to music and books. What's harder to succeed in? Is it the literary world, or do you think it's the music business, or do you think they're both the same?
They're both in this day and age. It's very hard in both. There's all sorts of. I think we talked before when we were Zooming about the parallels between just what the demands on you to try to carve out your little corner of the attention economy. These which books and music are very much in and seem to be, and also the disposable economy, which anything is, a month after release seems to be old news, and
that's right, yeah.
and fresh content. So the more I hear people talk about content and use that word, the more I'm convinced they don't care what that content is. It's just insulation for the head, or for until the next one comes. If there's any advantage in music, sometimes I think that no, it's not really an advantage. The saving grace of the industry, and it's not a saving grace, that there is still the lottery crapshoot that your song, through sweat and perspiration and happenstancing, whatever the forces unite, is the song or the book that captures. Because some song will be like they never have a vacant top 40.
That's right.
They fill there's never a vacant not bestseller.
Right.
They don't say that there's none that sold well enough this month, so we're not going to talk about it. That's probably like that's probably what keeps us going, maybe. Or one of the things is my uncle, who was a golfer, always said that the easiest hole on a golf course is the last one, because it's the one that gets you back, and everyone get a good score on the last one, no matter how much you threw a club and swore and said, this is the stupidest little enterprise ever invented in mankind. You do really well on the last hole, and you're back.
Right.
So sometimes I feel it's that way, and I always think this book is the last one.
It's the last one, okay.
But it's never. It's never the last one, because writing is what I do.
It's what you do.
What you do, and it's more than a compulsion. It's a way of being and a way of processing what we're feeling. And if we do it through a narrative or through a soundtrack, that's how we process it, and that's how hopefully many other people can receive it and similarly process something going on with them.
Right.
So I always have this saying that because I value my solitude. I do a lot of things where I can think on my own, and sometimes that's distance running, or I do distance open water swims in good weather.
Oh, okay.
Hence also being around a beach and a shoreline to get inspiration for this last book. And there's great solitude in all that, and so I always liken that book writing especially is a wonderful solitude. And then I always like to differentiate the difference between solitude and loneliness.
Okay.
Solitude is writing your master book. Loneliness is trying to sell the damn thing.
Right.
Crickets so much.
Right. So speaking of selling books, how much is your book retailing for, and where can people purchase it?
It's retailing for on my sites, and $25 is the retail that I've started for, and robritchiemedia.com.
Okay. We'll post the links in the comments.
And that also has links to other means. It has links to my printer publishers, a bookstore. It has links to Amazon, should you so desire. Their pricing may differ. I'm not. Once it goes that route.
Right. And who's your publisher, if you want to give them a plug?
It is Ardith Books from London, Ontario. Okay. And it's a hybrid. Kind of unofficially, I'm self-published, but they really do the bulk work. They do the layout and they do the typeset, and they've done the distribution now. So and they're in their store. So it was book writing and songwriting a few years ago was just a wonderful thing. As you know, when you tour, you probably still put out vinyl or CDs, and it's your merchandise store is out there to help supplement the income. And I had books out there on Tanglefoot shows and RPR shows back when we were touring, and that was the pop-up bookstore and it did wonderfully. Don't have that so much now. Gigs are hard to come by, and since the pandemic,
they really are. Post-pandemic, it seems like there's what's the word I'm looking for? Like a bottleneck, it seems, of artists.
That would be the right way to say it. Yeah,
because everyone had 2 years to spend working on hopefully they were working on projects. And in that time, they recorded albums and did all this stuff, and now they're all releasing them at the same time.
Everybody's at the same stage.
That's right, because now that lockdowns are over, everyone wants to get back into touring and doing business. But I guess part of the challenge is a lot of the festivals now, they literally have a 2-year backlog of artists that they couldn't present. Now they want to offer them first right of refusal for their first season that they can present acts. But meanwhile, you still have this backlog of people trying to also, get gigs and pay their bills and, of course, promote their material.
Yeah, I know that the RPR did Summerfolk.
Right. Summerfolk, of course, that's right,
this past year, and that was actually our 2020 contract we're doing in 2022.
Right.
Next April, we'll be at the Brampton Folk Club for, I think it was a 2019 or 2020 show that never actually, it's still not happened. So it'll be 3 years.
3 years
from backlog, them trying to fit in all the cancellations and scheduling and stuff. And folk clubs are only so often, right? They run a series of 4 or 5 shows a year. Right?
That's right. Yeah, I think it'll be still, honestly, probably another year or two for all this to kind of level out.
Yeah.
And as well, we lost many businesses, of course, over the last couple of years. And some artists that I know have even hung up their guitar and quit the business.
Yeah.
Some of them well-known musicians.
It's cautionary tales when there are... you hear of people. I had a chat with, James Gordon, folk musician from Guelph, and it was with a group called Tamarack for years.
Oh, okay, of course, that's right, Tamarack, yes.
And well established and toured everywhere as a solo and a duo and as a Tamarack and sort of a folk icon. And hearing him come up to you and you're ready to ask him, got any ideas on gigs? And he beats you to the punch.
Yeah.
Got any ideas on gigs? Because it's just not what the scene out there is just not what it was.
No.
And I mean, he's still going and he'll do fine because his following is long. But that's the other thing. The following's age. And we toured a lot of folk clubs and coffee houses and stuff, which depended on a lot of volunteerism.
Mm-hmm.
Really. Festivals the same way. And those folks that ran those are getting older, and I don't know if the generations are replacing all of them.
Right.
Commercial clubs is where my son Josh is trying to make his way, and there are some good avenues for exposure. It's most clubs want 3 acts on in a night, and it's splitting the pie in many pieces. So,
right. Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that a lot of ADs are retiring and getting older, and that is a good question. Are they being replaced? Because a lot of these positions too are part-time or it's volunteer, and so therefore you're not necessarily making a salary. Right. So that you may have to do your other regular job, and then you're kind of doing this job. So that's kind of the challenge there as well. Yeah. So it's kind of a period of uncertainty. It seems.
It is. Yeah. It is. I mean, the other advantage we had back in the day when we were touring full time is we went to the States regularly. We went to England once a year, and so that was. And our agent over there, who I mentioned, she kept a roster of she had some British acts, but largely Canadian, American, Australian acts because she could market them as such to all the clubs over there. Well, they'll be here for a month. You better get them while you can. And it kind of increased the demand aspect. Right. So we'd have a month to 6 weeks over there every year. With good touring and good following built up. Same with the States. Probably at the height, Tanglefoot did a third of the shows Canada, a third in the States, and a third really condensed for a UK tour.
Right. That's great.
Yeah.
And do you have any other music projects coming out in the near future?
The one interesting thing is, and it's been fun, it's another thing I keep mentioning, my son Josh Ritchie, joshritchiemusic.com.
That's right. He'll be on the next episode, so stay tuned.
That's right. Yeah. He'll look better than me, too. I collaborate with him, so I play on his CDs and such, and he wanted to record my stuff because I have a backlog of songs and stuff. So there is one I've written is actually a companion piece to the book. It's also called Between the Sand and the Sea. I had Josh I did the bed tracks, and Josh did some great guitar fills, and he's producing and engineering it. I just talked to a videographer yesterday with a meeting. We're trying to do a video too, because press and PR want visuals with their music all the time.
They do. It's all about the content.
It's
remember?
about the content. Yeah. And so, that's fine, because I have an eager videographer up there that wants to try it. I had because my book is female centered, I didn't want to be the vocalist, and the range isn't right. So there's a singer here in Toronto named Jill Harris.
Okay.
Wonderful singer. She sang in a trio for a long time called the Au Pairs.
The Au Pairs.
You know the Au Pairs?
Right, yeah. Okay.
And lately she sings for the big cover studio, Dwayne Gretzky's.
Okay. Wow.
And just this past fall was hired on to Broken Social Scene tour all across the States.
That's great. Yeah.
So, and she agreed to do it. And so we were passing files back and forth and did a great job.
Excellent.
So we will get that out in the spring, hopefully, because my book has sort of a seasonal aspect to it. Your summer beach read with a little bit more, hopefully.
That's great. Okay.
We'll bring the music out for sort of the spring, not relaunch, but boost. We'll call it the boost.
The boost. That's right. I have to remember that. We'll have to use that term as well when we reintroduce things.
Yes. Because inevitably you do. Because that's what all the content people tell me to do. Yeah, that's right. They say so. Market, get results, rinse, repeat, and do it all again.
Exactly. So whether it's someone purchasing music you've worked on or purchasing one of your books, what do you hope they take away, or what do you hope they get out of that purchase?
I hope that with this book and with all the other books, I hope that they see in the characters foibles, which my characters tend to have, something of themselves. Not just the foibles, but the redemptiveness in the imperfections of the characters. I tend to write. Maybe some of my books have grand themes, but tend to write from the minuscule, from the minute. So, very, very modest characters. Maybe thrust into an exceptional circumstance, but I try to have them be relatable in that sense. So none of my characters are royalty or stars in their field or things like that. My main characters tend to be shy and retiring, because I feel shy and retiring in my head most of the time. I do have reclusive tendencies.
Right.
Not wholeheartedly, because I love getting on stage and
of
singing
course,
and playing.
That's right.
I mean, you could be argued that that's singing and playing at people, but I don't really buy that, because I think part of the appeal of the bands that I was in was that we did perform to them, not at them.
Right.
And it was lots of, when I did solo shows and house concerts and stuff, it was very, I remember I couldn't wait for the first song to be over and the first introduction to happen so we can start a rapport. Which is what I loved when I went to see shows when I was a kid. I wanted to, introduce the next song. Tell me about it. It's what I did. I remember going to Bruce Cockburn concerts and going, introduce this next one. I've always wondered about this next one.
Right.
And when he did, I got something out of it.
And is that something you try to do also when you're writing? Because, when you're playing a live show, those first couple of songs, you become acquainted with the audience and you all become a part of the show together.
Yeah, that's
but with
the
a book, you're not necessarily in the room over their shoulder. Oh, you're on this chapter. Okay. Do you still find a way to build that rapport, or do you just let your writing do the work and hopefully they're into it?
You hope the writing does the work and they're into it and they're along for the ride. And those that are going to pick up, that read fiction, are looking for a story. And then, and people have told me that they like the unexpected twists and turns of, God willing, they like the writing too, but the plot twists and the construction of the tales that I'm telling, and that's half the fun of doing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. So we're coming up to the last couple minutes, and I usually ask people. I usually ask the same question to a lot of the guests, and that's, what advice do you have for someone who wants to be an author or get into the literary world, and they're just, maybe they're in high school, they just started writing, in their English class, but they really have a knack for it and it's something they want to pursue. What do you suggest that they would do?
Well, the obvious answer is to keep on writing. If you can find a writing workshop, a writing retreat, or a writer's group that, and maybe you have to start it yourself, and it could be just two people.
Okay.
But because what I sense is what needs to happen is you have to find someone you trust with criticism, that when they say your third paragraph sucks, it doesn't mean that you suck.
Right.
It means that just,
constructive criticism.
And trustworthy, but still honest feedback.
Right.
I tell the tale that I did a workshop once where a fellow workshop leader said, never have your spouse critique your writing, because they'll
I don't.
And I had to laugh.
She's too harsh on me.
You haven't met my wife, because I my official editors will put a little question mark beside this passage and say, I don't think I'm quite gleaning the meaning you're getting from this. And the same passage my wife wrote with red ink right through it and went, huh? Question mark. So not a danger, but that's the advice I'd have to start with to get trustworthy and back and forth, and that means that you actually presumably you're doing it with other writers. That's have to be able to provide, and it actually editing other people's writing helps hone your skills of what works, what doesn't work.
Right,
and because you're seeing it with clarity, whereas if you're just doing it with your own, inevitably this sentence is your baby. You just can't bear to get rid of it.
And that's kind of a common pitfall, whether you're a writer or a musician, they fall into. They surround themselves with yes people.
Yeah.
That tell them everything they write is awesome, or every melody is great, when really it isn't. That's why you need a good editor or producer or someone to kind of work with you on your project to give you that honest sort of feedback.
Yeah. I know that even in the music world, Josh and I will throw on a song and try to parse the parts, and with him it's the recording process and what did they pan left and what did they pan right and that sort of thing, and the whole engineering of it, and say, what could they have done differently? Do you like that? Do you not like that part? Did that work there? That works for music too, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, great. Well, thanks so much for coming in
Thank you.
Talking with us today. And all the best with your book launch and book release.
Thanks so much.
And I have a feeling we'll probably see you again in the near future.
I hope so.
Every now and then, it hasn't been a few years, but we sometimes are up in the Owen Sound area attending some sort of show or a gig I got to do. So I love going up to the area. Right. And my family's roots are actually Chippewas and Nowish, Cape Croker as well.
Cape Croker,
so that's in the area as well. Yep. So it feels like we're already neighbors.
We are.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you know the topography that I come from. So that's great.
That's right. Yeah. Well, thanks again, Rob. Really appreciate it. And all the best.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you for watching.